here we are.
Our next speaker, actually our last speaker for the series, last but not least, is Dr. Giancarlo Masi, right?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, and he's the curator of the museum in Rome. What's the name of the museum in Rome?
It is the planetarium of Rome. It has also a museum as part of the full structure.
And you do research work with your two telescopes. You have two,
Yes.
like, what, 17-inch?
Yes.
Delta comes in about 100 kilometers from Rome,
Yes.
from where you live.
Under better skies than Rome, of
Better
course.
skies than Rome. He's going to give two talks. The first talk is new technology using a single arm fork mount. But actually, you can see that outside over here later on. And the second talk is a virtual telescope project. Also, Dr. Masi has an asteroid named after him, 21795 Masi.
It is an unlucky asteroid, but...
So, it's not a hemorrhoid, it's an asteroid, right? Unlike Don, for Don it's a hemorrhoid, but anyways. Yeah, so he's done a lot of work with the virtual telescope project, so he's going to talk about that. So I'll go ahead and let you go ahead.
Thank you very much, Tim. So first of all, I'm very happy to be here. For me, it's really a very nice opportunity to stay here with us. And I wish to thank also the people organizing this wonderful star party, and particularly Tim, because Tim was kind enough to show me beautiful things with his telescopes over the last nights. And I must say that every time I find people under the stars sharing the same interest, the same love for what is happening up there, is for me always a new chance to discover that the stars are always something making possible to people to meet. Not only science. I'm not only attracted by the science coming from the sky, but also from the human opportunity to meet people, to meet friends. And it's for me fantastic that I, like Walt, like other people around, I've been in touch with them for a couple of years through the internet, through technology, and finally here we are in person. So we are alive, we are real after all. And this is amazing. And technology is also playing a very strong role in our own activities. Well, I am a professional astrophysicist, but my interest in astronomy started when I was a child, more than 30 years ago, I must say. I must admit that time is running. And since I started looking up, I really decided that that was my way, I would say, my life, because I decided to do astronomy my own job. I decided to make the stars part of my professional life. And I did a lot of research. I have been working, for example, for a lot of time. I've been living actually in Southern America, in Chile, as I worked to the European Southern Observatory there. I've been using those fantastic scopes, but also my small ones under that sky. So the amateur part is strong in me. And over the years, I decided to, I would say, to replicate, some professional technology in my own instrumentations, because while I still love looking at the stars for my personal love of the sky, I still want to do research, because now I'm basically working on public outreach. I am curator of science at the Planetarium of Rome, but research is still something I feel so strong. So I wanted some personal telescopes able to do research. And I live in Rome, as I was saying to Tim, and I must admit that the sky over Rome is not the best in the world. You can easily bet how the sky there is. And my telescopes are about 100 kilometers south of Rome, where my parents live, where I grew up, actually. And the problem for me was to go there and come back every night, because I work in Rome. I have to wake up early in the morning, because at the planetarium, they don't care about my night, my night style of life. And I wanted an easy access to this. And I started thinking about remote astronomy and trying to see what was around, what was offered by modern technology to fix this. And I will talk about this later, because as Tim remembered, I will try to share with you two different topics. But I want to start from this one because for my personal scientific needs and also for my imaging needs, because I really love to take images of the stars, I was looking for something able to make my life easier with these tasks. I've been basically using all the mounts, all the technology around. As I said, as I remembered, I had a very long experience with the giant telescopes under the southern skies, but very often those telescopes are like a video game, you know. You actually never see the telescope because other people very often are using the telescope for you. You just ask from the rear line what you need, and they will point the telescope. But sometimes you can use other smaller size telescopes yourself. And I'm very pleased to share with you my experience with this, I would say, very unusual tool. This new mount, by chance produced by an Italian manufacturer. I am Italian, and I apologize for my very Italian English, but I cannot do anything for this, so I apologize in advance. I should ask for a disclaimer to be signed earlier. And I was looking for something, especially for my scientific needs. What I do about science in astronomy, I mainly do, for example, photometry of some special variable stars, the cataclysmic ones. They play a very important role in stellar evolution. And I also track asteroids with occultations and other things like this. You know, these are fields where the amateur astronomer can really give a strong contribution. But if you do these activities with a traditional German equatorial mount, because of course, as you know, you have to track the stars, your target, you have to keep the telescope monitoring for a lot of time, sometimes for a full night, these targets. At some point, you have to stop your section when you reach the meridian. And you have to flip the meridian and start the session again once the telescope is west of the meridian. And this can sound as a normal thing, but to my experience, sometimes I have lost the very critical event happening in that very minute. This happened several times in my life. A lot of scheduling, a lot of planning, and the event went lost because it happened at the flip meridian time. So I wanted something different, but of course on the market you had some solutions, but I really needed a very reliable one because my system is, of course, not under my fingers, you know. And looking around, I discovered that the solution was very close to me at 40 kilometers away from the place where I live, where an Italian manufacturer developed, I must say last year, this new technologic tool, this fantastic mount. This is at least for my experience that I'm very happy to introduce to you. As you can see, it is a single arm fork mount. And I would like to show you what technology is inside this and why I fell in love with this one. First of all, you are well trained to the meridian issue. If you own a German equatorial mount, you start tracking the target when it is east, the sky is putting the target south, and here you have to flip the meridian. I can assure you that after many, many observations, I have lost a significant percentage of my chances in a few minutes, because sometimes, you know, the event happens with some uncertainty, and Murphy is always happy to make the event happening when you are flipping the meridian. So this is why I wanted to fix definitely this problem with a technological solution. And I discovered that this strange object, which at the very first sight is hard to recognize as an equatorial telescope, an astronomical mount, I discovered, I was saying that this one was going to fix my needs and my troubles beautifully, really beautifully. This mount is, as you can see, a single arm fork with a very intriguing shape. I would say, if you don't mind, that this is a true Italian fashion piece of hardware, and I really like also the aesthetic side of this stuff. And it is offering several, I would say, advanced features, like a technology that the manufacturer called fast reverse. And this is a very interesting aspect I would like to share with you in a few minutes later. All this thing is actually designed using cutting-edge technology machines because the manufacturer jumped into astronomy 15 years ago, and it started developing these things because he wanted to fix his own troubles. You know, when experience suggests you a solution that is the very best chance for you to offer a very nice improvement. If you fail somewhere and you fix that fail, you will really add something to human evolution, you know. And everything here is worked with, I must say, the very cutting-edge technology you have in industrial mechanics, and the material used are really the first quality available. And I must say that when the first time I went there to visit this guy, I was really shocked by the design, but also by the clear appearance of the quality of this instrument. What is new inside this? A lot of people know that inside an equatorial mount, generally also other kind of mounts have, I would say their heart is a gear, okay, with the worm, okay. And this way you can handle the tracking trouble, the tracking issue. So the telescope is actually tracking the object while the planet is rotating, okay. Here, actually, you do not have these devices. The real revolution here is that you are using some pulleys and some tooth belts. Actually, they offer the same result, that is something rotating at the sidereal rate, but with a very different philosophy, with really an array of benefits. And I must say that I'm still impressed every time on the field I see this working. And the real important thing here, as you can easily understand, you really do not have the flip issue anymore. Because as a fork mount, of course, you can go through the meridian flawlessly. Because you really don't need to invert the telescope position, because you are not going to, I would say, to crash with the telescope against the tripod, because by design, this is, of course, without this trouble. But the strong addiction here, as you can easily see, I think also by the image, this is a very, very, I would say, stable, robust, and accurate solution. Because let me say that after a great experience with very reliable machines, I really wanted something on the same level. Of course, I didn't want to go back in quality and reliability. I wanted something on the same level, and this Italian product actually was, for me, good enough. And I talked a lot with the manufacturer before starting using it, because I wanted to understand why he developed this. I really love to understand what is behind something, because knowing that, you can really understand better I would say, the added value of what you have in front of you. And the manufacturer told me that this one was to fix his own problems because of his typical work, typical job duties. He was unable to spend a lot of time doing images. He could just take pictures, for example, for a couple, 3 hours, when the target was sitting on the meridian. You know very well that is the best time for you to take images, because the object is at the very higher altitude, and so you have very less atmospheric extinctions. You have very small seeing interferences, at least once compared with lower altitudes. And this way, he could put the telescope, let's say, 2 hours earlier than meridian and go 2 hours after. 4 hours of continuous imaging on the same target, matching his long exposure needs. And of course, I saw here a solution for my troubles as well, because I could go to the meridian without any interruption. So I could take, for example, switching to photometry, a full night session, photometric coverage of one target from its rising to its setting. For example, it's fantastic if you look at a very high time resolution light curve covering 10 hours, the full night. You are amazed sometimes when the star is crazy enough to behave like a Luna Park, if I can say this. And this one for me was really good, and I wanted to look better into this, also because with this solution I discovered that auto-guiding was very, very easy. Sometimes people fail understanding that having an auto-guider is not enough to have a good picture. How many times you lose 1 hour or more just trying to setting up your auto-guider because the aggressiveness is too much, because the backlash is too much. And you try to play with everything, changing this and this just to find the best compromise. But why you have to find a compromise when you can have the final solution? And I believe that this proposal is a very good solution, because this technology, as we will say in the next step, offers some very new solutions to these typical troubles. You can image for a lot of time 30 minutes exposure, for example, single 30 minutes exposure without any wrong image. This at least based on my experience. And in fact, I believe that while the astro imaging, long exposure astro imaging, also with the, I would say, long focal length tubes, because for example, here you have a 9.25 Celestron optical tube, as you can easily recognize. And if you use this at full focal length, you can still have, and I have some picture for you, very perfect images. I can say, please trust me that if I ask the system to take 10, 30 minutes exposure, I can use all of them because the system is completely reliable. And in addition to this capability, also able to handle quite weighting setups, because it is very compact. And if you want, I know that the manufacturer is showing this mount here, you can really put here even 10 inches Schmidt-Cassegrain or similar stuff, they are quite demanding about guiding. But for me, together with this one was the key factor, because really I could do unattended science without any interruptions. And thanks to this, I was able to cover some events that were very critical. Some events that I was going to lose if I was still doing this job with traditional German equatorial mount. So having a system assuring this kind of continuous coverage for me, at least, was really a benefit. And another thing that I find very useful, for example, when you are doing, if you like them, I don't know, asteroid occultation, sometimes you have a prediction of the area where the occultation will happen, no? And maybe that the border of this is about 50 kilometers from you, from your observatory. And if you take this, there is also a very nice handle. You can bring this with you and go there. And you still have a very, very reliable, with continuous coverage system from the very right place where the occultation, for example, is scheduled. For me, this is something really amazing. With my previous setup, the one I'm very happy with, of course, it was impossible because I could not carry hundreds and hundreds of kilograms away in this easy way. So for me, this one was amazing, and I really like to address your attention to the only counterweight needed, if needed. Many optical tubes really do not need a counterweight at all. This is less than half a kilogram. So after doing bodybuilding with my mount for years, with this one, I have been really happy with this very small weight. But there are a lot of technical specifications here, and the manufacturer will be able to answer to your curiosity. For example, you can actually regulate the amplitude of this arm to host larger tubes. So you can do a lot of things. It is not a fixed solution. It's a very flexible one. And here is the secret. I hope that the manufacturer will not blame me for showing the secret of his job, because it is not using, as I said, gears and worms. When you are using these traditional, reliable enough devices, you should keep in mind that you are moving the telescope, even a weight telescope, okay, well balanced, but still weight telescope, just having a single contact between the worm and the gear. Just a single. If you open your telescope while working, you will see this very easily. While here, you have a tooth belt. Actually, you see embracing the whole main pulley here. You have basically from 50 to 19% of the full contact. So if, for example, locally there is a trouble, maybe here, the rest of the contact is just perfect. So the local trouble is actually smoothed so well that you can still work without noting this. Of course, you need an autoguider in this case, especially because there is no system on this planet assuring you a perfect guiding without an autoguider from the very east to the very west. You have a lot of things, flexor, atmospheric refraction, I can assure you that if you go in detail into the tracking problem, you will discover a lot of things you never talked about earlier. It is not just a question of perfect mechanics. It is just the first order of the problem. And here you can see that there is a complex, a very intriguing device with 4 stages to create the right reduction factor, you know, and I must admit that the guy convinced me to work intensively with this, and if results are what you need to decide if something is good, I must say that the results are telling me every night that this one is really a good solution. And here it is why the guy called it fast reverse technology, because thanks to this technology here, thanks to this full contact here, you have a lot of contact area, not just one point. You really do not have backlash, because you have always a large percentage of the surfaces in contact anytime. If you know, especially in declination, if you have to change the direction of motion, you have to regulate these things on a typical German mount. Here, it really don't matter. It is immediate. It happened just immediately. And another thing I discovered, and some friends here, like Chuck, knows very well that I already started, I'm rebirthing as a visual observer after too many years looking at one monitor, and I really don't like looking. It is better. There are better things to do than looking your computer. And with this one, I also find very nice properties for visual observers. For example, if you look through a very high power telescope installed on this kind of telescope with this technology, if you just touch the telescope, even with a strong, I don't know the English for this, if you give a shock, you will be amazed by how fast the system will actually dump out the oscillations. It's amazing. Another thing that I did was just to check where a star was on the CCD. I gave a shock to the telescope, I took another picture, and the star was, after 1 second, to the very same position. This means that really the system behaves like a rock. These are things that you will check yourself if you want these nights. And the fast reverse is explained this way. So really, you don't have backlash at all. The system also, thanks to its solution here, has very small friction. If you move the system manually without, I would say with the, if you free the axis and move the system manually, you are really impressed by the smoothness. I think that mechanics is something you have to enjoy also with your hands, not only with performances. Your hands sometimes are better than a software to judge what you have in front of you. And of course, this one is a very, I would say, a very new proposal, and I'm still discovering some benefits from this, because this is less than 1 year old, and I discovered this technology a few months ago, but I really started soon to experiment with this quite intensively, because I have seen a sort of heaven for me here. So maybe that in the next months, I will be able to add more. Here it is another detail of the system. So you can see you have just pulleys and belts, and I want to underline that these belts are not common ones. They are very strong. They are made with the best material available. And here, I must say that the experience of the manufacturer with the, I would say, high-end industrial mechanics is bringing some very nice benefits, because all these parts are used in very complex and heavy-duty machines. So you can imagine if these materials used here help those very heavy-duty machines, you can easily understand how a telescope just making 1 ton per day can work with this really eternal material here. This is something I tried on the field. Of course, I still have just a few months of experience, but so far, this is what I can say. Here it is the mount as it was working here. It was funny for me to take a time lapse with the camera on the rear of the telescope. So you can see some stars crossing there. Here it is the team telescope. Here it is your.
This was
your fluorite telescope team, because we are close, because you are close to the place where this one is located. And I just want to stress some of the special applications. I believe they are so beautifully possible with this setup, and I apologize for my bias here, but you know, experience is a ground to experiment, to test things, okay? So I can just speak based on my experience in this area, and I can say that, for example, on time-resolved photometry, it means a lot of shots over the single night to probe the luminosity of a star is a field for me where I spend a lot of my career. I have done over the last 5 years about 200,000 of CCD images for these purposes. So I must say that I really consumed in this activity. And while long exposure astrophotography is perhaps the most common goal of this device, I still want to underline that there are some important scientific possibilities which are offered at the perfection level with this stuff. And I must admit that I could not resist, and I started to work with this mount. Here are some results, some pictures I have taken over the last months. This is, of course, the M20, the 3-foot nebula, and you can see, despite seeing how the images are, there is no processing here, no dark subtraction, no flash fielding, and you can see that this image, coming from the sum of several 30-minute single exposures, you can see that using another guider, it worked so nice. Of course, while imaging is not my is not my main activity, I wanted to test how it worked on that area. And here it is something I asked the manufacturer this picture because I saw him taking this Omega Centauri image with an astrograph produced by Officina Stellare, and this is a single 10-minute exposure, and once again, I think that you can see here how the auto guider worked beautifully. I have been working with other common mounts with similar payloads, and from time to time I have to cancel some images because they were not tracked well. I must say that this system is providing to me I would say, good images on a constant basis. And to conclude this quick presentation of my experience, of course, there are a lot of technical details I cannot explain because it is the job of the manufacturer, otherwise it will be my job. And manufacturer, I think, will be happy to answer your questions. I can say that with this special mount, I was able to finally find a solution to some of my needs. And now in my observatory, I'm going to make this mount available all the time because, as I said, I have a remote control observatory. And once my tests will be finished, and it will take just a short time because everything is working well, this system will be part of my own setup. So together with the larger telescopes, I will use a smaller one for this kind of tasks. And I'm pretty sure that this will make the difference because, as I said in the past, I have lost some important events happening just when the telescope was flipping the meridian. I don't know if this explained to you what is new here, and I hope that at least you can find some ideas. If you have some, for example, some interests like me, I can say that this one is working beautifully. And of course, for me, another important factor was the possibility to interact with the manufacturer, because of course I had to fix a few things because this technology required a little bit different mind handling the mount itself, because of course I had to understand how it worked, and I had plenty of assistance by the people working on the factory who create this mount. And I still want to show you a picture of it because I must say that the first time I saw it, it was simply beautiful. Another thing I would like to say to you is this one, especially if you like taking long exposures. At the beginning, I had some troubles, let me call this way, when setting the auto guider to a very strong correction factor, 0.5x, for example. And I discovered that the best for this is to work for example, at 0.2, 0.1, and the manufacturer is developing a new electronics for this, by the way, so they are still improving. This very small correction factor was for me another hint into the reliability of this mount.